Welcome to another episode of Talking Fast, a Gilmore Girls podcast. I'm Suzanne.
And I'm Alexis.
And we're two longtime fans of the show, and we're excited to rewatch and recap it along the way. Okay, so this is a trailer for our podcast that'll start coming out next week on October 5th. Our episodes will be every week on Tuesdays, and we're choosing October 5th because it's the 21st anniversary of the show, somehow.
A very special holiday if you were not aware.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll also be feeling like fall outside, and as we all know, Gilmore Girls is a fall show.
Right, it's the perfect time to go back to Stars Hollow and to make it a special first episode of the podcast. It will be a mega episode with 2 episodes. So we're going to recap episodes 1 and 2 of season 1.
And after that, we'll just be doing 1 episode per podcast episode. But I think doing 2 for the first round will give us plenty to talk about, I'm sure.
Yeah, it will help us just get into things, get the hang of recapping, introduce all of our segments to all of you. We've had a lot of fun creating them, and we think we'll have really unique and creative ways to analyze the show as we're recapping it. But on that topic, as we're talking about recapping, you might be wondering, why are we starting a Gilmore Girls podcast at all? Suzanne, do you have any thoughts? You were the one, in our text message chain, you suddenly said, wouldn't it be fun if we started a Gilmore Girls podcast? What was running through your mind when you asked that?
I think we have always had office conversations about Gilmore Girls, and we both have a bit of an obsession with Gilmore Girls, and it was coming up on fall. It was almost my time for my annual rewatch, and I don't know, I've always also kind of wanted to do a podcast, even though I hate the sound of my own voice.
Who doesn't?
So I thought like, we have interesting conversations, and I feel like we have interesting and unique points of view, so why not go for it?
Yes. Yeah. I know, why not share the annual fall rewatch tradition with the world, or at least our, whatever ends up being our small audience.
Yeah, I'm so excited. And I can't, planning now, I just can't really fathom how it's going to be by the time we get to the recapping the reboots after season 7 is finished, and, the crazy journey that we might go on.
Yeah.
But I'm excited,
Right. And we talked about starting a rewatch. We had said an appropriate time to rewatch Gilmore Girls is when it's a crisp fall day. I think we had said maybe 50 degrees Fahrenheit outside in our Midwestern climate for us. And then the second we decided to start a podcast, we realized, we're going to have to do a lot of prep on 88-degree humid days.
Yeah.
And then looking forward, who knows how long we'll be doing this? Probably a while if it goes as we plan it to. So we're going to be recapping on winter days, summer, you name it. It will be the year in the life, revival. We'll have all the seasons in there.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Maybe we'll have snow on the day that Lorelai first smells snow.
It'll be our version
Wouldn't that be cool?
A white Christmas, for any Christians out there who love to have snow on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve.
A white Gilmore Girls episode.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, that also sounded a little bit sketchy.
Well, the whiteness of Gilmore Girls is something we'll be discussing, as well as the snow.
Yeah.
So multiple meanings.
Very true.
We, if you don't know, well, we haven't introduced ourselves yet, but we do a lot of literary studies. So we'll be finding multiple meanings, symbolism, metaphor, all that kind of stuff in the show.
Mm-hmm. And we'll be critiquing things because Gilmore Girls is now 21 years old. And a lot has changed in the past 20 years. So I'm pretty excited to, obviously we love this show, but there are definitely things that we need to critique about it and to kind of, explain why why that wasn't okay in 2000, but it was still on TV. It's definitely not okay now, and we'll talk about all the nuances and everything for characters and situations and stuff.
Right. Like, it's just as important to us to express our love and admiration for the show as it is for us to explore and critique it, complicate it. But yeah, we should give you a sense of who we are as your hosts. That's hard to say. As the co-hosts of Talking Fast. Who we are is important. As we mentioned, we'll have our own unique perspectives that we're bringing. So let's take a second to introduce ourselves. Suzanne, would you like to go first?
Sure. I am Suzanne, as Alexis just called, you might have guessed. And I am a graduate student right now. I work with medieval literature. So it's a little bit different from Gilmore Girls, except for that one episode, the Bracebridge Dinner, which I'll have plenty to say because I mostly study Old English literature and Old Norse literature. And in that episode, they attempt to call what they're doing Old English, but it's most definitely Shakespearean, if that.
See, the critique is starting early on.
Yeah, I do love that episode, though. So that's where I come from as far as a scholarly background. I also, have a bachelor's in English and my PhD's in the English department, so I have a critical eye, just like any English major you'd expect. What about you, Alexis? What do you do?
I am also a graduate student at the same school. That's how Suzanne and I know each other. Why did I decide to go to grad school is something I was thinking about when I was writing notes for an introduction. When I was in undergrad, I decided to go to grad school because I love that my classes, I was an English major, and my classes are basically intense book clubs. You have a lot of outside reading. You have to prepare in a way that you might not for a casual book club. But I love that. I love to read, but what I love the most is talking about it with other people, and things become so much more meaningful to me that way. So I think that's one reason I'm excited to do the podcast, is that I have fun watching Gilmore Girls on my own, but it becomes so much more to me when I talk to Suzanne about it. And I'm optimistic that it's going to be that even magnified or multiplied when we have hopefully listeners as well, talking to us about it. But to give a little more context, I am a lot later than Suzanne. I study American literature around the turn of the century. So that's the 19th into the 20th century. I align a little bit more with what Rory reads and what she mentions at different points throughout the show, although her English major seems to be going for journalism or political science in a way, at least early on. And I am not a journalist or anything like that. But that's why I really identified with Rory as a young kid. I was such a book nerd. I'm sure you can probably relate. That's kind of it becomes harder later on than when not to get too ahead, but when critiques of Rory start to become a popular thing, and they're coming from me too, that's a character that I used to insert my own worldview into a little bit. So it's become complicated since I first started watching.
So we should also probably talk a little bit about how our relationship with Gilmore Girls started. Do you have a first memory of Gilmore Girls, or how did that whole obsession with Gilmore Girls begin for you?
That's a great question. I began my relationship with Gilmore Girls watching reruns, actually. So I never watched Gilmore Girls when it was airing originally on the WB, I think it was. I have no memory of that network existing. This dates me on how young I am, maybe. I watched on, it's called Freeform now, but it was ABC Family at the time. They played reruns around the afternoon time when I would get home from school, around junior high years. So I would go and watch, and I could sometimes get like consecutive chunks of episodes because they played them in chronological order, of course. But I was never able to just completely watch from the beginning until the ending. But I remember I really liked to like get off the bus and walk home really quickly to get there in time to watch them, basically, and then just be on the couch in my living room, really enjoying the show. And I would be so frustrated if I would miss an episode, and then I was so thrown off about like what was happening. So it wasn't until it was on Netflix streaming that I could watch it completely through, and that was like a fantastic experience for me. But what was your first memory of Gilmore Girls for you?
My first memory of Gilmore Girls, I think I was like 15 or 16, and my parents had pretty strict TV rules in our house, although by that point they were starting to loosen up a little bit because we were all getting older. And I remember, so this was probably like 2005 or 6, so it would have been, yeah, I guess season 6 probably. And I remember turning the show on. I think it was a new episode, and I watched a little bit of it, and then my dad made me turn it off. His explanation was that people don't talk like that in real life. I'm assuming he was referring to how fast they talk, which, I mean, in my case, it's definitely true. I don't talk that fast. But my theory has always been that he actually had the hots for Lorelai and just felt a little bit awkward about that. But after that, I didn't watch Gilmore Girls probably until, actually, I think it was maybe 6 years ago or something. I was living abroad, but I had gotten Netflix, so I had like a VPN so I could watch the American Netflix.
Ooh la la.
And Gilmore Girls came on. I know. And Gilmore Girls came on streaming, and I was like feeling a bit homesick at the time, so I just started watching. And it's kind of a quintessentially American show also. Like, I grew up in the Southwest, so the environment was quite different, but all the cultural reference points and everything. And so I like watched all the way through, and ever since then I watched it all the way through every year. And then, a couple years ago we got that reboot. Or maybe it was 4 years ago. I don't know, a while.
I looked it up. It's 2016, I think, the revival came out. And so I'm guessing a year or so before that is when it probably came out on Netflix.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I never really considered if I thought of Gilmore Girls as an American kind of culture heavy show. But I really follow what you said about, like, even though I'm also not from New England, especially as, like, American literature often prioritizes, like, a bunch of writers from New England and, like, Puritans, for example. So it's, like, I think we're often used to, when we think about, like, the U.S., sometimes the dominant thread in that is New England, and but I think a totally different thing, too, is just all of the pop culture references they make. Like, we could make a reference guide to Gilmore Girls and probably make some good money. Just, like, unpacking every single reference they make. It's very, like, of the pop culture, I feel like, of when the show was airing in the U.S., which is why some of it does completely go over my head, because I was younger, like, in the 2000s, and not totally, like, hip in the way that they were. But then it also dates the show a lot, too, when we watch it 21 years later. And that was something the revival, I think, was trying to get into, like, how to update everything that they're referring to throughout the show, now that it was so much more recent. But
yeah, that's so true. Although I definitely understand, strangely, I understand the references from the original show better now than I did before. I think because when I was a teenager, I grew up in a small town, so I didn't really have that much exposure. The internet wasn't really that much of a thing yet. So now I understand a lot of the people that they're talking about and stuff that before I was just like, they're making a reference, but I have no idea who this person is. Like, I think in the first episode they reference RuPaul, And when I was 16, I had no idea who that was. Obviously now I do. So, yeah. It's an interesting way to watch something that's dated but also still very relevant in some ways. But
you mentioned you had a different understanding of the show when you would watch it later on. I was thinking about this. What changed for you, like, when you were first watching it, then maybe, like, your first complete watch through, and then your ensuing ones, like, did your relationship with the show change at all?
In a way, I think, like, it was still the same general feeling of it being kind of comforting, because the first time I watched all the way through, it was comforting for me to watch something so American, I guess, which, I mean, I have plenty of critiques about America, but still, it's the culture I grew up in.
Right, when you're homesick, you're homesick, right?
Yeah, exactly. And since then, I feel like it's become a nostalgic thing for me. And it's even a nostalgic thing for, like, kind of the simplicity of my youth, you know? I mean, they don't really have phones or anything like that. It's just, life seems a bit more simple despite all of their romantic entanglements. And it's cozy. Yeah, it's just kind of a nostalgic comfort thing. I also watch it every fall because it's the beginning of a new semester, and I'm always super stressed at the beginning of a new school year. And watching Gilmore Girls is like, I know what's going to happen. I know what to expect. I still enjoy it, and it's still funny. But it's, comforting in a way, you know?
Maybe in some ways when we watch Gilmore Girls, we're transported to, like, a Luke's Diner environment with, like, a sign is suddenly up, like, about no phones, no Wi-Fi. Maybe that's one of the more disorienting components of the revival then, is that Luke's has allowed Wi-Fi. Perhaps that was something that should not have ever been allowed to happen.
Yeah. Though I do love, in the revival, how he refuses to give out the password for it. That cracks me up. Till Jess comes along, of course.
Yeah.
Is that something we should mention before we go further? Just so that people know what they're getting themselves into? Are you Team Dean, Team Jess, or Team Luke? And I realize that's a very kind of misogynistic type of question, but it's still important.
I know. If we're this far along in the episode, I'm sure anyone listening is just dying to know where each of us falls on this debate. And I'm not sure if it's cliche or, as you said, a little sexist to just whatever, but it's still fun. It's still fun to talk about. So this actually helps me talk about a bit how my view toward the show changed and it shifted over time. When I was watching in, like, junior high and just kept catching episodes here and there, I definitely was Team Jess, and I still have a lot of affinity for Jess because, like, he's a bad boy who reads books, and I can't tell you how cool that is to me as a book nerd myself. Then when I rewatched, my first time I ever did a whole rewatch, I was in undergrad, in college, and I mean, I'm a little ashamed to admit it on the microphone, but I am I would say I'm Team Logan now, which I know, I hope nobody doesn't, stop listening right now after I said that. I'm totally aware he's, like, an entitled, privileged asshole, but I hold that in the same space as, like, how witty and charming, attractive he is. I think the thing about, like, when I was watching it, I was about the same age as Rory, and I was just, again, putting myself in her shoes. Imagine being wooed by someone like that, and I would just be swept off my feet even if I thought he was an asshole, which he is. Once we get there, we can talk about character development, season 6 and 7, whatever, how it's, like, one of the more stable relationships Rory actually has within the original show, surprisingly enough. But yeah, that's all I'll say. Oh, also, like, it's a breath of freaking fresh air because her and Logan start to hook up right after the darkest Dean relationship that is just, sure, Logan is an asshole. There's so many problems with him, but, like, the way he comes after that Dean stuff is just, like, thank God, thank the Lord we've moved on.
Yeah, that was definitely, like, the worst segment.
Mm-hmm.
I am Team Jess for all the reasons you stated earlier. But yeah, when I was in high school, I was, like, a super introvert, as I still am, but a rebel as well, I like to think. And Jess would have been, like, he would have been one of my friends. I understand he has a lot, especially in the first, like, when he first comes into the show, he has a lot of anger and stuff that he needs to work through, and he has a very justified reason for being as fucked up as he is. I forgot whether we're a no cursing show or not.
That's why I said freaking earlier. I don't usually say that, but I wasn't sure either. We'll discuss after.
Yeah. But, I mean, yeah, he has a justified reason for being so messed up, but I don't know, especially as his character progresses throughout the years, I feel like he matures more than any other character, basically, including Luke, Lorelai, and Rory. He changes the most, and I like him. He could easily also, in the later years, fall into that, like, kind of poet boy characteristic that I find very annoying, but he's a poet in, like, a punk kind of way, so it's a bit more forgivable, I guess.
Yeah, no. I wondered if, like, would he ever become, like, that guy in your MFA class, you know? But I don't think he would be, because, as you said, he's punk, and there's, like, substance to him as well. There's this, like, deep interior life that, you're right, he definitely changes a lot for the better.
It's true. And we're both fairly anti-Dean, I think, but we'll try and give him, you know, proper treatment in the first couple seasons. Although, you know, at some points he's just irredeemable. I mean, he's tall, so that's a good point, I guess, for him.
Is it a personality, tallness? We will investigate as we watch. But yeah, for any Dean fans listening, first of all, please feel free to contact us and, you know, plead the case for Dean. We'd love to hear it. Mm-hmm. But yes, yeah, we're going to try to do our best to watch with open eyes. If at the end of the day our biggest complaint is he's a bit boring, and then, yeah, a bit irredeemable later, like, we'll see what we can do. We'll see what kind of opinions we form as we're looking, like, to recap in detail in a way that we haven't before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have a favorite character besides, you know, we don't just care about the boyfriends here. We care about other characters. Do you have any other favorites?
I have a number of favorites. And it definitely depends on the episode. And I feel like I've had different answers for this in the past. But I think, let's see, at the very beginning, I'd have to say, like, Babette and Miss Patty are some of my favorite characters. Lane is always a favorite character. And Paris.
Mm-hmm.
As well. Especially, yeah, Paris, as time goes on, is just an amazing character. Who are your favorites?
I have a lot of overlap. I'm also a big fan of Lane and Paris as something like a theme I really enjoy either reading or watching is like female friendships. So the fact that Rory has two such interesting close friends who change a lot throughout the series is really fun to watch. I think I would rather be friends with Lane myself, but in terms of a character, Paris is just like, what a character. Like, we'll talk a lot about Paris, but she was one of like the few, like such a positive part of the revival for me actually was the focus on Paris there. Also, if you asked me when I was younger, I would say Rory was actually a favorite character of mine. And now if you ask me right now, I've had a renewed interest in Emily, actually, as the, just a wonderful character, too. So, but of course, like, just the Lorelai and Rory relationship, rather than necessarily, like, characters, but relationship is just so fun to see every time I watch. It's just so unique, so it's such a different way to think about the roles that, like, mothers and daughters play and, like, the relationship they have with each other that you don't see even still, like, there are other shows that do it, but this was, like, really, it's a really standout example of a really cool take on mother and daughters.
Yeah, I agree. And, like, adding Emily into the mix with a totally different mother-daughter dynamic. Yeah. I also love Suki and Jackson. I think theirs is my favorite relationship, maybe. Or my favorite romantic relationship, I should say.
Are there any episodes or storylines that you remember really liking that you're looking forward to getting to recap? You mentioned the Bracebridge dinner. Did you have any others?
I think that's the episode I'm most looking forward to. I also just love, like, the whole town-hating Jess portion of his early years, and I'm really looking forward to getting into that and, like, kind of tearing down all the weird classist prejudices that the town has that they, like, put on poor Jess, who's just a teenager trying to live. I mean, he is kind of an asshole too, though, so.
This is a really interesting show for, like, class analysis and the ways that how the show represents class can be, we could say, positive in some ways with, like, the Lorelai storyline, but it can also be so negative, but in a way that is, like, good to analyze, like, it's fruitful for our analysis. But then it also and it just has so much class in it, like upper class bullshit stuff that just goes unchecked by the show, but we will be checking it, we will be calling it out.
Yeah.
What
are your favorite episodes?
A few of my episodes I really like. We're not going to get to them for a while, actually. So it's something to look forward to. Do they have
Logan in them?
Some of them do. Thank you very much. You Jump, I Jump, Jack with, like, the Life and Death Brigade is such a fun episode, even though we were just a second ago talking about, like, class privilege and whatnot. We can talk so much about that once we get to Yale, Logan, Life and Death Brigade, all of that stuff. But that is the first episode where you also get, you're starting to realize Rory and Dean are about to break up. So it's like, woo!
Finally.
But earlier on, some of the more iconic episodes are ones that I'm looking forward to. So, like, A Tisket, A Tasket is so fun with the picnic lunch. That has Jess in it too. Lorelai's graduation, actually, like, I can, even thinking about it now, I could, like, tear up at that shot where, like, Emily and Richard are in the audience, and when they see her walk across the stage, it's just so sweet,
so proud.
It's, like, just a moment in time where their relationship is just, it's good for that moment. And then I think, I don't want to say too many more, but they shoot Gilmore's, don't they? The one with the dance marathon.
Oh, yeah.
Another one with Jess. Yeah, and that's good. So, yeah, those are some of my episodes I like. In general, even though I don't know if the quality of the show is as good in the Yale years, we can debate that, and we'll see how we feel when we rewatch it. I always look forward to it because, I don't know, I guess I'm just, like, a nerd. I love college. I love grad school. I have a complicated relationship with academia now that I'm in it. But when I was younger, I was so, either, like, before I was in college or while I was in college or even after, I just have, like, either I was looking forward to it or now I have nostalgia for it. It's just something that really interests me. So I do look forward to the Yale stuff. I can't help it.
We should move on to our last topic, I think. So we've already talked about our love for Gilmore Girls, of course, but what about podcasts? What's your relationship with podcasts? What kind of made you feel like you know enough about the medium to decide to start a podcast yourself or ourselves?
I started listening to podcasts a couple summers ago when I had a job that was basically data entry. So it was like, I was only using a small portion of my brain, let's just say, to input all of this information. And I wanted to be like entertained or intellectually stimulated while I was doing that kind of monotonous work. So I started to listen to podcasts at that point. And before that, I didn't get podcasts at all before that. And I think it was because I hadn't found one that pertained to my interests. I thought they were a bit boring. Like, it made me think of when I was really younger, my dad's driving us around in our minivan, listening to NPR, and that could not have just bored me anymore. So I had to find what interested me, and it was pop culture related podcasts. So I like to listen to podcasts like related to books like Harry Potter and the Sacred Text, or related to TV shows like shout out to Glee Wind, who recap Glee in a way that is like so full of love and passion, and then also just kind of like hate, or just that really, and the eye for the critical of like critiquing the show in a way that inspires me for what we can do here. And then of course onto reality TV. I listen to quite a lot. Suzanne and I both listen to a lot of Bachelor podcasts as well. So
yeah, arguably too many.
arguably too many. In the vein of Gilmore Girls, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I have listened to Gilmore Guys, which is like the celebrity podcast of the Gilmore Girls recapping area. So they inspired me as well to realize you can start to recap a show that is 21 years old, and other people are still doing the same thing. So as far as like how that's prepared me to start a podcast, it's been a lot of absorbing of the genre, I would say, and now trying to apply it, which has been a challenge, but it's been really exciting to think about like what are things I like in other podcasts that we can try to do here. It's been a really fun, creative outlook. We do a lot of academic work. We do a lot of teaching, a lot of that kind of thing. So it's been fun to apply like this analytic but also creative side to our own project, make something that's ours and for fun, and see where it goes. But yeah, how about you in podcasts, Suzanne?
I 100% agree with what you were just saying. I also just started listening to podcasts maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. I'd gotten into audiobooks for a while, and then people kept talking about podcasts, and I kept being like, no, that's not my thing. And then finally I started listening. I think I listened to, what was my first podcast? Actually, probably Harry Potter and the Sacred Text was also one of my first podcasts. And then, I think it was Two Black Girls, One Rose, which is a Bachelor recap podcast. And I absolutely love them. I still listen to them. And I think they were my first podcast because at that time I didn't know any other people who were obsessed with The Bachelor. And I wanted to get some other, people's opinions. Little did I know I was heading down a long road with that. But now I listen to a lot of different kinds of podcasts. And yeah, I agree. I think like just listening to so many has given me a good idea of what I like, what I would want to do in podcasts myself. And I'm pretty excited. I feel like we're both super organized people, and I think that we can bring all of our different skills to this, and I'm excited to, see where it goes.
Yeah, we're emulating some of the greats, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
I also wanted to ask you a bit about your pop culture interests as well. Sorry, this is going a bit out of order, but we're recapping Gilmore Girls because we're longtime fans. Have you been a fan of other shows, be that like TV, movies, books, like involved in any fandoms? Because I think by recapping a show and making a podcast, we're definitely like stepping into the Gilmore Girls fandom in a really active way that we haven't before. Have you had experiences with other fandoms that can either like inform your experience with Gilmore Girls fandom now or just illustrate like your love for pop culture?
Yes, I have, I think, very varied interests, to be honest. And the other fandoms that I've really been a part of over the years, obviously Harry Potter was a huge thing growing up, and I was a huge Harry Potter fan. I still am a Harry Potter fan, even though J.K. Rowling has made that extremely hard to keep loving. But it definitely impacted me a lot, and I was definitely part of that fandom growing up. I have dabbled in fan fiction writing. I also have been a huge Lord of the Rings fan ever since I was a kid. That's actually what got me into medieval studies. And I also, I'm such a Lord of the Rings fan that I studied abroad in New Zealand for a semester as an undergrad and went on all the Lord of the Rings tours and everything. So those are two that I've been obsessed with for basically, my whole life since I was a child. Otherwise, I mean, I watch a lot of TV and I intake a lot of media. And yeah, my interests are all over the place, honestly. At one point when I was in my early 20s, I decided to stop pretending that I liked things I didn't like and didn't like things that I did like. So now, I'm allowed to like The Bachelor and Lord of the Rings, you know?
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
I love that. I've adopted a similar philosophy later on in life. There's no guilty pleasures for me. It's just pleasures, and there's no need to feel guilty about what you like. Mm-hmm. In terms of fandoms, I've had some of my experiences as well. I was also in the Harry Potter fandom. I don't know if I would say I was in it. I don't know if I'd say I'm in it right now. I think I'm taking a hiatus for similar reasons that you mentioned. I don't think my love for it will be able to go away, but I'm taking a break from it as I kind of reckon with everything I don't really want to reckon with J.K. Rowling anymore. I tried for a while. Now I just want to forget she exists and not give her money ever again. Yeah. And then we'll see where we go from there. But that was one of my first fandoms. That was my first experience with... I remember the first, reading the first Harry Potter book as being when I realized, I can read things that are beyond, Junie B. Jones. I was pretty young when I started reading Harry Potter, and it wasn't all the way out yet. I think maybe the 5th book was out when I started to read, but I remember when they would come out, when the 7th book came out, I read it in a single day. I was just I read for 12 hours. I was obsessed. I read fan fiction. I had t-shirts, so much. I went to midnight movies, airing, it was a huge deal.
The days.
The days.
By the way, a podcast shout out. If you love Harry Potter and are similarly struggling with it, but still kind of want to hear what people are saying about it, I'd suggest listening to The Gayly Prophet. The two hosts are queer and they bring their perspectives to Harry Potter, and follow them on Instagram. They have a great guide to firing J.K. Rowling, which I think is wonderful. They're just a great podcast overall. I love them.
That's awesome. Definitely continuing to support other people, but not J.K. Rowling, I think is important. That's awesome. Other fandoms I've been in, I loved Twilight when I was younger. That was a thing during, junior high and high school for me. That one might still be a guilty pleasure. No.
Yeah. I still watch all those movies.
Yeah, I have, and what I love too is like watching them, knowing who Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson are now. Like Kristen Stewart as like super queer and awesome, both of them so alternative and edgy. To watch it again, like kind of like with that in mind for Bella and Edward is just so amazing, knowing that it's like this Mormon writer. And it's a new fun way to approach it. But the last fandom I would highlight is Glee. Oh my, talk about love to hate and hate to love. Wow, I was super into Glee when it was airing. I saw them on tour. I was on Tumblr. That was my like big Tumblr experience, was with Glee. A lot of like fan fiction, fan art, all of that kind of stuff. Like all of the blogs for speculating, for like listening to the new songs the day before they came out. Well, it was new songs on Fridays, and then the episodes would be out a few days later. But I just loved it, and I've missed being in a kind of fandom since then. I'm not really in one right now, I would say. But I have dabbled in fan fiction as well for Glee and Gilmore Girls more recently, actually, but probably not going to share that.
Well, not yet, at least.
No. But I'm just obsessed with watching TV. I watch so much, even more than movies. I'm more of a TV person than a movies person. So and something both of you and I were involved in was a Harry Potter reading group based on like the model of Harry Potter and the Sacred Text, which was really about like going back to the roots of where our love for that series began, and like love for reading in general, and having like a reflective sort of book group that now is like making me think like, oh, that could have been a sign that a podcast would be in the works for us, down the lines, because if that, it was similar to something you would do in a podcast, like read a chapter per week and reflect on it and things like that. So yeah, I love pop culture.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I think, do we have any last words, or you think this is good for our trailer introduction to ourselves?
I think we're good. Yeah.
Okay. In that case, look out next Tuesday, October 5th, for our first recapping show. And remember, it's going to be a jumbo episode, so it's going to be the pilot and then the episode after that, which I think is the Lorelei's first date at Chilton. So look forward to that. Follow us on Instagram. You can rate us on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. You can always also email us at talkingfastpodcast@gmail.com, and we really look forward to hearing from all of you. Feel free to add your favorite episodes or anything like that in our comments on Instagram. And we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, talk then. I waved as if they could see me.